This is Join Us in France, episode 241. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is a podcast where you'll hear pragmatic advice for your next trip to France. Hopefully, you'll get inspired to go beyond Paris and see the rest of France too. On the podcast, I invite travel enthusiasts to join me for conversations about how their trip went, what they loved, and what they wouldn't do again. Join Us in France gets support from Patreon supporters, one-time donors, and soon-to-be-released GPS-aware tours. More on that after my chat with Elise. On today's episode, Elise joins me to tell you about a few jewels, out-of-the-way places that you can visit in our neck of the woods, Occitanie, or the southwest of France. We'll talk about the village of Lautrec, where they grow the most wonderful purple garlic, the city of Castres and its surprising Goya museum, the Sidobre, where you can go climbing and hiking, and she even gives me some tips about places I should visit this summer. If you're interested in this episode, I recommend you also check out the other day trips we suggest from Toulouse that you can do with or without Elise, but she definitely makes those visits better. Show notes and photos for this episode are on
Bonjour Elise. Bonjour Annie.
How are you?
I am fine.
Oh, good. You look good.
I do.
You look full of spring, summer.
Summer. I look springy, summery, but I still have a bad toe.
I'm sorry about your toe.
Yeah, but I'm glad I look good.
Yeah, you look good. You look lively.
I look lively.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're going to do a day in the Tarn.
Tarn.
Le Tarn. T-A-R-N. Yeah, the Tarn.
T-A-R-N.
Yeah. We've been sort of circling around Toulouse.
Yep.
Day in the Gers. Day in the Ariège.
Yes.
We're kind of touching all the different departments that are in the vicinity
of Toulouse.
Toulouse. And the Tarn is actually fairly big. And it's got lots and lots and lots of things. But
right, necessary. If it's a day in, we're not gonna
we're just
talk about everything.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a kind of little itinerary for a full day that I've done, and it's really nice because it's very varied. When we did the Gers, it was largely very historical buildings, abbeys and little villages. This is going to be a little bit different because it's a combination of little history and a little bit of art and a little bit of nature.
Nice.
And it's definitely doable in one day.
Mm-hmm. From Toulouse. So
from Toulouse.
Let's imagine you're staying in Toulouse for a week and you want to go.
It's a good full day. Yeah, it's a good full day. But we're going to do it in the order of a little bit of history, a little bit of art, and a little bit of nature.
Okay,
and then coming back. So basically, obviously, you can do some or all of this in the same day, but it is very feasible to do it all. It's a full day. It's a nice full day of activity.
Excellent.
Okay. So, firstly, we're going to visit the village of Lautrec.
Ah, yes. L'Ail de Lautrec.
Yes, l'Ail de Lautrec.
L'Ail rose.
Right. Lautrec is actually listed as one of the plus beaux villages de France.
Right.
It's on that list. It's really quite beautiful. I've been there a number of times.
That's most beautiful villages
the
of
most
France.
Villages, yeah. Which of course
it's kind of a label.
It's a label, but it means that they're very well taken care of.
Right.
It means that they have things of historical interest and are very well taken care of.
Yeah.
Buildings have been restored. There are flowers everywhere, so it makes them very nice to visit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not as well known and therefore not as touristy as some much more famous ones like Côte Sociale and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it is really very nice. And it's in the middle of rolling hills. That part of the Tarn. As you get, the Tarn is an interesting department because as you get further north and east, it gets more rugged because it's actually going into the central mountains called the Massif Central. This area, and then if you go to the southeast, it actually winds up being almost Mediterranean-like. But in this part, it's pretty much north by northeast. I'd say northeast or something like that from Toulouse. It's very beautiful rolling hill country.
Yeah.
Very nice little valleys, but not big deal, that kind of thing. And the village is, in fact, the name Lautrec, of course, is part of the heritage of our famous painter, Toulouse-Lautrec.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I was doing a little research because my original idea was simply just to talk about what it looks like today and why it's fun to go to. But then, of course, I did a little bit of research on the history of it and was actually surprised to discover how old it is.
Huh.
It's older than Cordes Social.
Wow.
Cordes Social was created in the 1100s. Mm-hmm. And this was actually created in the 900s. And it was what they called at the time a castrum, which means that it was a fortified castle on the top of a hill.
Okay.
Kind of like a peak, not super high. But the castrum was basically, I guess, an idea that the people in the Middle Ages took from maybe the Romans, was that you... we're talking at a time when things still were fortified because there was always, everything was dangerous, everything out there, whatever it was, everything was out there was dangerous. It could have been people, wolves, it doesn't matter. Everything was dangerous.
Yeah.
But so they chose sites that were high up a little bit that could be fortified and that could give you a view all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the root of castrum is the same as castle, basically, in Latin. And so it turns out that is what it was, that they've done archaeological digs. They found that it was actually a Celtic site way before the Romans came. And then, of course, the Romans came through like they did almost everywhere, especially here in the southwest of France. But its original, its official history begins in the year 940.
Wow.
And it was actually created as a fortified castle by the counts who were designated by Charlemagne.
Wow.
I mean, I guess it was his sons by the 940s.
Yeah,
sons or grandsons. But they were part of this original thing of the county, the counts of, etc. And it was a Benedictine abbey. That's its beginning. So it was, in the Middle Ages in France, the origin of things is either religious in terms of some kind of religious structure or a castle for a lord. And then a little bit later, commercial when we get to the Bastide and those nice villages,
And I'm sure there were other structures, there were probably other villages, but they were not built with materials that have remained.
Right, exactly.
So probably they were thatch huts and, all sorts of habitations that just didn't live.
Of course.
Didn't survive.
This is this place where Lautrec is stone country, so obviously the ramparts, it had double ramparts. There's only 2 doors that still exist. And I don't remember whether you can really see that there were double ramparts, but apparently because it was created with the donation from I guess it was Charlemagne's grandchildren, they were given a lot of money, so they made this very beautiful Benedictine monastery and then protected it with 2 sets of walls. So it became very, very important, and the area around it, the land is very rich. So the actual village right now, of course, is up on top with some new modern houses down below made out of stone. But obviously you were right. The peasants and the people who are not quite as wealthy, they would have had the thatched roof houses that were on the hillsides, going up and then a little bit further away.
And also there were a lot of chateaux that were made of wood. They didn't make every chateau out of stone, so the wooden chateaux have not survived.
No, they haven't survived. And the palissade, which would have been the first original ramparts, would have been made out of stone as well. But amazingly,
you mean wood?
Palisades are it's
made of wood,
it's made out of wood, with the points on top. I don't know, what did I say? I don't know.
You know what you say.
I don't know what I said. Right now, the village actually has 1,700 people, which is a fair amount for a village of permanent residents, which includes people who live down below, not inside the actual fortified that are still up on top. But believe it or not, in the Middle Ages, it had...
Lautrec still has the fortifications?
It has pieces of it.
Okay.
It has pieces of it. And then the two very beautiful doors with the broken arch that are really lovely. You know. But it had, in the Middle Ages, 4,500 people, which is a fairly good-sized town in the Middle Ages. And part of that is because it was in the center of an area that had very, very important agriculture. And also, it's part of a larger area that already in the Middle Ages was very important for textiles. Lots of sheep, wool, and that kind of activity. And so it was really important in the Middle Ages, much more important than I realized. And the reason it is now called Lautrec is because there was a count or viscount starting in the 11th century his name was Isarn de Lautrec. Isarn, I-S-A-R-N. It's a name you see a lot from that time period. Yeah.
I've never met somebody called that.
No, I don't. Today, I don't think you would, unless it's a zombie come back from 1,000 years ago.
That'd be a good novel character name.
Yeah.
Isarn.
Isarn. Come here, Isarn. I don't know. It just has, it's a very ancient.
Cat name.
A cat name.
Isarn.
Okay. Maybe. Anyway. But anyway, and he was the ancestor of Toulouse-Lautrec.
Okay.
So it really is, in the long term, connected to the family of our Toulouse-Lautrec. The painter. Right. And so it was known, it was very famous all through the Middle Ages because it was the Viscount's castle, because it was very wealthy. Right now, there are two pieces of rampart that are left and a very beautiful door called door in the sense of the doors entering into a fortified town. And one of them is called the Porte de la Caussade. I'm assuming that that's in the northern direction because that's where Caussade is going towards the north.
Probably.
And it had its vicissitudes, as they would say. Vicissitudes, yes. It survived endless numbers of conflicts. Lots of these towns, of course, in the southwest of France really did. It was taken by Simon de Montfort in the war with the Castres. Boo. Everybody out there has to go boo, right? The bad guy. Boo. Simon de Montfort.
Yes.
And then it was released eventually. And then it was a victim of the war of religion between the Protestants and the Catholics. And interestingly enough, because it's very close to the place where I want to talk about next, which is the city of Castres, which is very close by. It's only 17 kilometers away.
Yeah.
Castres, during the period of the war...
C-A-S-T-R-E-S. There's an S at the end. Okay.
Castres became, for reasons I'm not really sure of, a stronghold of Protestantism during the war of religion. And Lautrec... stayed very, very Catholic.
Okay.
So at some point it was invaded and a lot of things were destroyed. And this is, of course, as we're talking in the 1500s, by the Protestants because it went both ways. The fighting, unfortunately, it was a nasty period of time for, a lot of people in France. And so it suffered during the Castres, it suffered during the war of religion. And during the French Revolution, the Benedictine Abbey was destroyed, almost all of it, except for the church, which of course is true almost everywhere in France anyway. Yeah. And there had been another monastery that was very close by, and that was destroyed as well. So it's interesting because when you visit it now, it's very beautiful. And you, of course, have no idea of all of this very movemented, as they would say in French, past.
Movemented. Definitely not movemented.
No.
That is not a word.
Very agitated. Very agitated.
Yes,
there we go.
Yes,
very agitated past. It is really very lovely.
Tortured past.
Tortured. Thank you, Annie.
That's good, right?
That's much better. Good. We're
and I did that without a thesaurus.
Without a thesaurus, yes. The road is it winds up a little bit. It's not quite as windy or as impressive as Puy-sur-Cé, a village we've talked about in the past. But you do have to drive all the way up, unless you're ambitious, and you can leave your car down below. And
What?
it's yeah, what? And it's still, of course, filled with really lots and lots and lots of houses from the 1500s and 1600s that have been beautifully restored. So it's really lovely to see. You go through the portal to get in, and it's got these lovely sinuous little streets, and it has this gorgeous square with this covered marketplace, which is really from the 1600s. Very beautiful, with very beautiful carpentry, lots of old houses, and if you go up a little further, and I've been there twice, there's a moulin à vent,
like
windmill that is still in use. So you can visit it.
Use like for something useful, or
yes. It's used to grind flour.
Oh,
so you can go up and visit it. And to be honest, I don't remember now. I don't think you have to pay to go inside. I don't remember, but it's constantly in use, and it is used for grinding the wheat to turn into flour, and it's organic flour that is grown in the fields nearby, and you can actually buy some there. And there's somebody there who explains how it works, and of course at the time that there were many windmills in the area, every hill was dotted with one. It was really it's very picturesque, and there's a beautiful little garden around it. So it's up the highest point, right above where the old houses are.
That probably happened a lot in the French countryside long ago, because they used mills for all sorts of things.
Right. They used them for grinding flour. They used them for water. I mean, it was usually down by the river. If it was to what else did they do? Oil?
They could do all sorts of things. Like in Paris, they used the mills to grind the stone to make plaster of Paris.
Right.
They could use mills to grind spices.
Yeah.
To get them fine enough, to sell. All sorts of kind of industrial procedures.
Right.
You have to grind things down.
You have to grind things down.
So anything you had to grind down.
Oh, and the other thing is that you're right. And in the 1500s, in spite of the problems with the War of Religion, it was the center of pastel too. The beautiful plant that makes the plant that makes the beautiful blue dye.
Yes.
And so at that time, the mill would have also been used for that, because it was used to crush the leaves, which would eventually be set out to dry and then turned into these balls that called cocagne. So it was used for. There was probably more than one. The one that's there was restored a bit. I think at the beginning of the 20th century it had stopped being used, but they put it back into use, and it was really fun to go up there and see how it works, and then buy flour that is really genuinely milled right there. However, just a warning, because it is organic flour, you have to use it relatively quickly. It has no preservatives in it or anything like that, and so you can't let it sit around too long. It goes bad. There's also a very beautiful church, which is the only thing left of the Benedictine monastery, Saint-Remy. And it's got lots of artists and craftspeople who live there. So it makes it very attractive as a place to visit, because it has a few restaurants, it has boutiques, it has, of course, places where you can get a snack, and it has some really interesting crafts shops as well. And of course, it is the town or the village of Lautrec is famous for the Garlic Festival.
Yeah.
And that is the first Friday and Saturday of August every year.
Yeah.
And if you drive, this is strange. I mean, the first time this happened, I thought, really, this only in France or maybe in Italy would do this happen. But if you go driving on these little narrow country roads right around Lautrec in the few weeks before the Garlic Festival, everything smells of garlic. And you're out there in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden it's like somebody's cooking. Where are they? I don't see anything. I see trees. I see fields. I see maybe some moo, and it's because the garlic is ready to be harvested.
Right, and you can smell it.
And you can smell it everywhere. And it's called pink garlic. There are several different kinds. This is one that's got an AOC. I mean, it's labeled. It's
freaking expensive.
And it's delicious.
I don't know. I can't tell the difference.
Oh, it's really, and it is. It's very aromatic.
Right, so you put a little bit more garlic and you get the same flavor.
Well, it's not quite. It's not as... It's actually soft. How do you explain it? Garlic can have a bite to it. This has less of a bite. So it has the taste and the aroma of garlic, but it doesn't have that bite that some garlics have. And so what do? They do this whole festival, which of course goes back probably to pagan times, actually. They have music. They have somebody dressed up as a giant head of a garlic. There's a parade.
As you do.
Yeah, it just makes perfect sense there, right?
Why not?
They have a huge communal meal. You have to pay for it, but you can participate. It's a 4-course meal. And I was looking at the menu of last year's, and it looked yummy, absolutely yummy, because you make lamb with garlic, and they have all tapenade with garlic. I mean, only the dessert doesn't have garlic in it.
Listen, one of the best things I ever made was I can't remember what it's called, but it's like garlic paste.
Yeah,
where you take a whole bunch of garlic cloves. Yeah, like 10 heads. So it takes forever to peel them. Right. And then you submerge... The garlic has to be submersed fully in olive oil. Okay. And you cook it on low, like really low. You don't want it to burn. So I did it with... I can't remember what the temperature is supposed to be, but I could look it up. But... And you slow cook this garlic in the olive oil, and then you mash it all up. It makes the best garlic spread for garlic bread or for pizza. Delicious, really delicious. But it takes forever to make.
I put a head of garlic in the oven. Yeah, and roast it. Yeah, on a low heat. Yep. Which is also very good. And when you go to this garlic festival, you can get that elsewhere at all the outdoor markets anyway. At the end of the summer, it's fresh, but you have what they call a tresse. So it's a braided. It's braided, and it's lovely, and of course it's very folkloric because you can hang it up. But it is wonderful. Fresh garlic is very, very, very different from the garlic that's been sitting for months. Yes. You get like in the middle of the dead end of the winter.
Well, around here, garlic grows really well. If you want to grow it yourself, it's not so hard.
But it's fun, and so anyway, so Lautrec is a lovely, lovely, lovely village. It's a place that you can.
How long would you stay there?
Well, if you visit the windmill and the church, I would say a good hour and a half. And if you go into the shops, longer. If you have a stop for a snack, or
because they have several shops, right?
Oh, lots of shops, and a couple of nice restaurants, and so it's about 50 minutes from Toulouse. Yeah. By car. So I would say that it's an hour and a half to 2 hours, that kind of amount of time, unless you're a shopper. You might want to stay longer because they do have some really interesting little shops there with some ceramics and cloth and things like that. It's also a place, if you choose to, as an early lunch, you can eat there. Right. So I would say that's about the right amount of time to stop there.
An hour and a half, maybe.
Okay. So then from there, we go east just about 17 kilometers, and we get to a city, the city of Castres. Yes. The city of Castres, which is the second largest city in the Tarn department, the largest being Albi. Right? It's what in French is called the sous-préfecture. Yeah. Which means it's the sort of assistant county seat. I guess that's what you'd have to say. It's the under county seat because that's what sous means, right? It's interestingly growing faster because it's got right now 42,000 people, which is more than I thought. Yeah, and it's because in the last 10 years there's been a huge economic boom because of industry, this mechanical industry and Airbus industry, which has set up subsidiaries there. So it went through a period of real economic doldrums, but is becoming very, very dynamic. Yeah. And I happen to know, because it's somebody who's sort of related to the family, the person who runs concert hall in Castres. He's in charge of that. And it's very dynamic. And he said everything is sold out absolutely all the time. And he's responsible for finding the different groups and things like that. But Castres, so we go from a very beautiful medieval village in the middle of the countryside to what really is a very interesting small or medium, I guess for France, a medium-sized city. It's a medium-sized city. Okay. 41,000 is definitely a medium-sized city. Yeah. And so the outskirts of Castres are not particularly impressive. I mean, it's just a sort of typical of a lot of these relatively small cities. But the old city center, which is not very big, is very, very, very interesting to visit. And Castres has a very long history, and its history is partly connected to the textile industry. Because starting in the very early Middle Ages, it was the center for tanning of leather, for the wool production and making of cloth, and for making also wooden shoes. Those were the three principal industries in the Middle Ages. Now, what is there to see in Castres? Now, it's a small city. So obviously, if you haven't had lunch in Lautrec, there are two enormous squares. One is called the Place Jean Jaurès, because it's also connected to the history of our famous Jean Jaurès. And it's lined with lovely little places to eat. I don't have any specific one to mention, but I've had lunch there a couple of times, and lots of little places that you can eat.
Pick with your nose.
Pick with your nose, and look at the menu and whatever. I mean, it's a very lovely, big, very big square, rectangular square. It drives me crazy to say square. I like to say place because it makes it easier. The city of Castres is cut through by the river called the Agout.
The quoi?
Agout. Agout.
L'Agout.
Ouais, l'Agout.
Okay.
Which is a tributary of the Tarn.
Okay, I've heard of the Tarn, but not the Agout.
It empties into the Tarn. And the waters come from the Massif Central before they go into the Tarn. So it's fairly cold water in general most of the time. And the old city center, which is famous for a special kind of house that lines the old city center along the river. This is where all of the tanning and the wool activity and all of this was from the Middle Ages. And what they've done is they've preserved most of these houses from the 1500s and 1600s that are right on the river on both sides. And there's two bridges that are really nice that you walk across and you can see them. And these houses are particular in terms of their architecture because they are 3 or 4 levels, because these were, like many of the houses in the Middle Ages, the commercial activity was down below and then the people lived up above. But because they're on the river, because tanning and wool activity required the washing of the wool and the water, the bottom level has 2 huge archway openings that actually open into the water.
Oh, wow.
So this is what they would do. And they would use these openings to do this activity. Obviously, in the Middle Ages, I'm sure the water was pretty disgusting because of it.
Yeah, it had to be pretty smelly.
And then they, of course, lived in these houses, and it was very, very prosperous all through the Middle Ages. Now, I don't know what it was like there in the 19th century, but now they've, of course, restored all of these houses, and they're all painted these very pretty pastel colors.
Nice.
So it's very interesting to see. It's just I
haven't been to Castres in years.
Yeah, it's very interesting because most people, it's not a big tourist destination.
No.
At all. But this old city center has a few things that are really, really interesting to see. And it's very nice because it's a very different perspective of life in France, compared to the little villages that are all on everybody's tourist list and things like that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, besides that, is that it is famous for a museum. And this is called it's the Goya Museum.
Oh.
Named after the Spanish painter, Goya. And the museum, which is very big, is in a good half of the old Bishop's Palace. There's a Bishop's garden, which is in front of it, which is this magnificent French garden, with the geometric forms and things like that. It's beautiful, very well taken care of. And what's interesting about the museum is that it was a local art museum with, I think, a part of it that was ethnological, with folk things and things like that. And then in the 1840s, a local, very wealthy person donated his entire collection to the museum. And in his collection, he had a bunch of paintings by Goya. Now, Goya... Goya took refuge in France during the Napoleonic Wars.
Okay.
He actually went to Bordeaux.
Okay.
Which is where he died. And because he lived in France the last few years of his life, he left a huge part of his collection to people in France. How this particular man, and I'm looking for his name because I wrote it down somewhere, how this particular man, his name was Brigiboul. I don't laugh.
Spell.
Briguiboul.
Brigiboul. Yep, Brigiboul.
Brigiboul.
That's it.
Mr. Brigiboul.
Wow.
I guess,
Monsieur Brigiboul de Castres. Monsieur le Brigiboul le Castré. Delicious.
That is awful.
Delicious.
That is awful. That is awful. Okay, I'm letting you just explain what that is.
No, I don't.
Okay. Yeah. So what happened was that this Monsieur Brigiboul, when he died, he left his entire collection of painting to the museum.
That's very nice. Thank you, sir.
So it is outside of Spain and outside of the Louvre, the largest collection of paintings and of engravings by Goya anywhere. There are 2 entire sets of his engraving series, which were about war. They're very impressive. There are 2 rooms filled with them, the entire series, and beautiful paintings. There are some paintings by Velázquez, 17th century, very, very, very important Spanish artist, and another important artist from that time period named Murillo. And so
another Spanish?
Yeah. And so in this little medium-sized city of Castres, we have, outside of the Louvre, the largest collection of Spanish art in France.
Wow, that's stunning.
It's stunning. And the paintings are gorgeous. And it's really a lovely museum. It's not a huge museum, but it's very impressive. And the all of the series of engravings by Goya are, he was very marked, very traumatized by the Napoleonic Wars. And he did these series of engravings about war that are really, to this day, extremely powerful. These are just small little black and white engravings, but they have the entire series of them there. The museum is really a nice museum. So it's a really, outside of 2 or 3 other cities, it's a surprising museum because its specialty, beside having some French art, is in fact the Spanish art.
Huh.
And
we're pretty close to Spain,
We're pretty close to Spain, And so you have the museum, you have these beautiful French gardens in front of them. All of this is very close. The part where the old houses are is just a few minutes away by foot. It's actually called the Venice of the South. I mean, I think it's a little bit of an exaggeration because it doesn't have canals. It just has the basic river running through it.
But it looks nice. I just looked at a picture.
It's really
nice.
Pretty. Yeah, it is.
I should stop there again.
Yeah, I should stop there again here. Yeah. And then, of course, we have to just mention a couple of words about Jean Jaurès. The Castres is where Jean Jaurès was born, and where he became a deputy. And Jean Jaurès is a major political hero, especially in the south and southwest of France.
Everywhere.
And everywhere. Jean Jaurès was a brilliant, the story of his life is actually amazing. He was a brilliant, brilliant young student. His family was actually fairly modest, And he went off to study in, first, I think it was in Toulouse and then in Paris. But he was very, very influenced by the work and the conditions of the workers in the region around where Castres is and in the Tarn, because there were mines, there were coal mines, there were lots of mines, there were lots of the textile activity. And he was very quickly politicized. I really don't know what made him politicized that way, but he became very politicized. And he was a champion of workers' causes. And he became a member of at the end of the 19th century, of the Socialist Party. And he was also a journalist, and he wrote for newspapers. And he was very, very influential. He was a brilliant orator. He was a brilliant speaker. And he was extremely persuasive in his speech, and he had a lot of enemies. And unfortunately for him, he was also one of the proponents and was one of the people responsible for the law in France of 1904, or 1905, which is separation of church and state. Yeah. He was very much a Republican, which meant someone for a republic as opposed to a monarchy. Not the American sense of Republican.
Yeah.
And he was also a pacifist.
Yeah.
He believed in strikes for the miners, trying to get them better wages, trying to get them better working conditions, but he was not a bellicose person. And as the world was fomenting to enter into World War I, he wrote a series of articles about how there should not be a war, and certainly France should not enter World War I. And after publishing these articles, which were rather aggressive in their statements about how there should not be a war, unfortunately, in 1914, sitting in a cafe in Paris, he was assassinated.
Yeah.
And he was assassinated because of his political position. Mm-hmm. And he has since become a major hero.
I think he's become a martyr to the cause of workers' rights and better conditions, working conditions for people overall. And he's well loved. I mean, you can't... I'm not sure if my tiny village doesn't have a Rue Jean Jaurès.
Yeah.
It might.
It might.
I haven't looked.
I know. I mean, Toulouse has a high school that's named after him, a major alleyway that's named after him.
Boulevard,
every city has something.
Yeah, either a major plaza or a boulevard, and if it's a village, it might have a smaller thing, but he's remembered very fondly all over the country.
And if I'm not mistaken, he's buried in Montmartre.
I don't know.
Not in Père Lachaise. I think that's what I read.
It's possible.
It's very possible. But
I don't remember seeing him in Père Lachaise anyway.
No, I think he is in Montmartre. Yeah. But he probably would have become president of France if he hadn't been assassinated. Yeah. And he's someone who has had a huge influence. And you're right, he is a major hero of the
I think he's someone that people look up to, even to this day, for workers' rights.
Right.
Because, he was a man of his time. Even in America back then, if you think about it, the labor movement was quite healthy.
It was healthy. It was important.
It was important. It mattered. Important. And in France, even more so.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And of course, we're talking about, we talked today about the conditions of workers in mines and things like that, but nothing compared to what it was in those days.
Well, and sometimes we hear about mine accidents in China and places like
Chile,
that. It sounds like they still have a long way to go to make it safer to work in mines in some countries. Of course, in France, we don't have any left. I don't think we don't have working mines anywhere.
No, none. Zero.
Yeah, we have some that you can visit.
Right. I believe, if I'm not mistaken,
in Castres you can.
The last ones were closed down since I've lived here in France. So in the recent past.
It's been a long time, yeah.
But and if you read any of what he wrote, he was a brilliant writer. Mm-hmm. So he must have been a very charismatic person.
Yeah.
It's just one of those people. There are people like that. They just.
Well, he's one of these larger than life kind of person. It's like Victor Hugo and Jean Jaurès.
Right.
These are the ones that come to mind, even if you.
He was also involved in the J'accuse and the whole Dreyfus affair. In fact, I just saw a French movie about Victor Hugo and his friendship with the painter Paul Cézanne. It's a whole big deal because they were childhood friends and their story together is very complicated. But Victor Hugo was also very much like Jean Jaurès, someone who defended the workers, was a Republican in that sense of the Republican, And I don't know if they knew each other because Hugo is a little bit older. No, Victor Hugo died in 1902.
Okay.
And it would be interesting to know if they ever met.
Yeah. Something to look at.
Yeah, something to look up. Yeah, because when Jean Jaurès was killed, he was not that old. I think he was in his 40s, late 40s or something like that. You know. So anyway, so that's why the visit to Castres is a bit more cultural.
Yeah. Definitely strong French cultural roots. Like,
right.
It's real France. It's not. It's not the manufacturer's crap that people sell you.
Right. And there is a small Jean Jaurès museum in the city center.
Yeah, okay.
So for people who are interested in that kind of political history and everything, it's very nice to visit. It's very small. It's just the kind of thing where you get to see examples of his writing and I think items from his family life and things like that. But it's really quite interesting. So we've gone to Lautrec and then we've stopped in Castres and maybe had lunch in Castres. Yeah. Taken the time to visit the museum.
Yeah.
And from here, we're going to finish basically the rest of the day out of doors. So east of Castres, only 11 kilometers east of Castres.
I'm trying to think of what you're going to say. I can't think of it right now. I mean, I know there's a natural park there, but...
Well, we're going to go in the area called the Sidobre.
Le Sidobre, okay.
I love it there. And me, who's not a very, very, very big person for climbing and hiking, I love this place. It is part of a big, larger kind of... I don't even know if it's considered to be a regional park or what, but it's a geological region that's famous for its granite formations. It is the southwestern part of the Massif Central, which is, the oldest mountains in France. And unlike further north where they become volcanic, this is the area that is famous for its granite. And just like in the forest of Fontainebleau, which is famous for having huge rock formations and that you can scramble on and that you can hike around. The Sidobre is like that. So this is the thing about the Sidobre.
It's granite, though. It's big, big granite
so this
stone.
is the thing. It's got pathways. It's a region that is like a big, big, big natural park.
Right.
There are 2 or 3 entrances. One of them is called Vals et Plateau.
Vals et Plateau.
Yeah, that's where the major tourist office is. It's called Sidobre, Vals et Plateau.
Okay.
And you can get a brochure there that gives you an indication of there are bike trails, there are hiking trails, there are places that have what are called jumbles, which is, these formations of granite that have fallen.
they look like big rocks that have been placed on top of each other.
And a lot of them, because of their forms, have been given names because they remind people of a hand or an animal or this and that. And this is not but it's in the forest, so it's shady. So if you're doing if this is a day you're doing, for instance, when it's hot out, you go into this area at the place where you go at Vals et Plateau. If I remember correctly, there is at least a cafe. There might even be a little restaurant where you can get a snack. There's a campground right nearby. There's more than one entrance, but this is the main entrance. You take the departmental 30 basically to get there. And there are 15 different sites to visit that have names. And you just, it's great for kids.
Yeah.
It's great for kids. It's great for, if you have bikes and you've already done with your history and culture for the day, you've had enough. This is a great place there because there are some of these trails that are set up for bikes and others where it's just scrambling.
So hopefully you can rent a bike nearby?
You may be able to rent a bike nearby.
I will look. I will see if I can find it.
And there's an eco museum that gives basically a history of the formations of the rocks. There are picnic tables everywhere. It's lovely.
Yeah.
It's really, and it's the kind of forest I like. That is, it's not too dense. Mm-hmm. It's a mix of deciduous and evergreen type forest. So it's not, I don't like very dense, wet forest. That kind of creeps me out. I don't know why. It always has. But I love this one because you walk around and all of a sudden you see these formations and you can, and they're easy for someone like me. I'm telling you, if it's easy for me, it means it's easy, to scramble on, to walk around. Of course, you're wearing shoes that are,
right.
decent shoes for this kind of a thing.
But it's not like...
No, not difficult.
Yeah.
Zero level difficulty as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And then again...
so long as you have average mobility, you can do this.
Exactly, right. And you can just take a short walk into the area and then just find a place to sit, or you can do these trails which circle around and come back out, so you have an option. But it is very special because there aren't that many regions, particularly in the south and southwest of France, that have granite. And
she just dropped her headphones.
Dropped my headphones.
I'm always teasing her that her headphones are not on her ears.
Because of the shape of my head.
She says she can't hear me. I'm like, that's because your headphones
are gone. Yeah.
Are not on your ears.
Right. This is granite that is also used for making headstones, which of course is principal activity for granite. The quarries.
Principal activity for granite.
I mean, it's not the granite that does it itself, but as sculpture. This is a beautiful. It's actually famous because of the quality of the granite. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's this kind of these grays.
Yeah, so I'm going to look and see if I can find some bikes around there because this at the end of the summer we have relatives visiting, and I'm looking for. I want us to go between here and into the Grotte de Chauvet.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go the normal route that I've done a million times.
Right.
So I might go north a bit, Castres,
they go to
and then
La Cône there afterwards. It's beautiful.
Where?
You go from the Sidobre and you find the road that goes into the forest and up into the beginning of the mountains, and you go to the Mont La Cône.
Mont La Cône.
And it's gorgeous. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And it's charcuterie country, Annie.
That's what I need.
That's what she needs.
More calories.
More calories.
My husband will be very happy.
It's beautiful. It's not Mediterranean, but it's a very different world than the places we've been to in the Gers or in Ariège or things like that. And interestingly, it's a place I really like. Of course, you don't go there on a rainy day. I mean, you don't want to have to deal with the slippery rocks on a rainy day. But it's just wonderful, and it's kind of it's a relief to have a change like that. To go to a place that's so interesting. And the Eco Museum is really interesting. Now, I don't know. I'm really ignorant of everything related to the formation of the earth and that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to get just some simple explanations
to have an idea of what happened.
Part of it is glacial, I'm pretty sure, because it's similar to upstate New York. It's like you have these huge rocks that are made out of granite and boulders that have moved, and part of it is because of glacial activity. But it's not high up. I mean, it's only I'm not even sure of the altitude, but it's probably just a couple of 100 meters in altitude. So it's not like you're in.
Oh, it sounds like fun, especially with people that have kids.
Yeah,
you could easily. Yeah. I think kids would enjoy that a lot.
I think kids love it. It's a real place for them to sort of run around, scrambling. It's very much a family kind of thing to do if you have kids with you.
Get them away from the PlayStation.
Exactly, get them away from the PlayStation.
A problem for a lot of parents these days.
And whining about being in a city and going to a museum and whatever, going to a village. I mean, this is just where they can cut loose. And it's also, I just think,
but it's not big and dangerous. I mean, it's not like
no.
Right, because there are places where, like when we mentioned the places in the Ariège,
right.
They could actually fall off the cliff and hurt themselves.
Like Roquefixade or Montségur, you have to be careful.
Right. But this one, it sounds it's... I mean, they're big rocks. They might fall off the big rock, but they'd have to be...
Right. It's just... I mean, if you look at the site, you see pictures of kids everywhere. Children.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. And it's just... And then there's one other thing, which is... Because you know me, so I have to bring it back to a little bit of history. The Castres was... a a major Protestant stronghold during the War of Religion. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure why it became that way, but it was a very important city, and this is we're talking in the 16th century, the 1500s, and it was almost exclusively a Protestant city. So the War of Religion was very bloody. It was really a civil war, and a lot of the Protestant families, when things started turning badly, went into hiding in the forest in the Massif Central. So they went east into the Sidobre and further into the forests and the hills in this area. And two things. One is that they became what are known as gentlemen glassmakers.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Because one of the things that they could do, because there are all these small running rivers in this area, was learn to be glassblowers and live in the forest and do things like that. And so this area has, besides an eco-museum, a museum of Protestantism, which is interesting because aside from anything that's connected to the actual cult or, the actual religion, it talks about the War of Religions and how these Protestants who did not convert back to Catholicism, which a lot of them actually did, went into this region. So the Sidobre...
To be left alone.
To be left alone. And that is why, if you go further east and you get to Mont-Lacon, it's very, very important in the history of Protestantism in France, and then eventually takes you further east to the Cévennes, which was entirely, and still is, largely Protestant. So it's very interesting because not only is it different from a nature point of view, but it's also, in some interesting ways, connected to the ins and outs of the history of France.
Of religion in France.
Yeah, religion in France. So this is our day. And then...
and then you head back, I guess.
Then you head back.
Unless you're like me and you're making your way east.
Yes, exactly. And if you're making your way east, then you have little towns along the way that have... there are campgrounds, many in this region.
I'm not camping.
There are also little villages that have nice little auberges. And just to mention something, because we don't really talk about things, and this is just because I was thinking about this the other day, there's a series of little hotels with a label called Logis de France. The definition of a Logis de France, and they're rated 2-star, 3-star, and 4-star. So some of them are 4-star, which means they usually have a pool and other amenities like that. But by definition, they're small, usually never more than 25 rooms. And they have a restaurant, and the restaurant is always a good restaurant.
Yeah.
And in my travels around France, I have used them consistently or almost consistently, and I love them. And some of them, there's a book you can get, or you can go online and look at them. And in this area, when you go into this area after the Sidobre and going towards like Mont-Lacon,
there's not a lot of big cities.
There aren't any.
You're not going to find chain hotels.
And so what you do is you find there are these little towns, really more villages, and sometimes they're not in the village itself. There's something just in the countryside. But these are nice places to find a room, and you know that if you have a Logis de France, that you will also have a very nice little restaurant.
That's cool.
So it's a kind of nice thing to have in mind if you're searching for something really out of the way.
Well, thank you. You've helped me organize my trip now.
Now, yes, and I haven't yet been to Chauvet to see the reproduction, so I have to do that too.
Yeah, we want to go late August into early September.
Late August is good because it will be less crowded.
Yeah, yes, people will head. It's just because our daughter's working through the summer, so...
And my guess is that it's probably not quite as busy, but almost as busy as Lascaux now, because now they've made this reproduction. So,
oh, yeah, I bet.
And you have to reserve ahead of time.
Yeah. Oh.
But it's a very interesting region, and it's one that's very beautiful and varied and much less well-known.
Oh, yeah, this is part of France where you don't see a lot of American visitors.
No, French visitors.
French visitors, yes. French people love it.
Right.
But American visitors, not so much. Maybe some English people, I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. But,
maybe an Aussie or two that's lost.
Maybe. You never know. Looking for the kangaroos, they won't find any.
Unless there's a zoo.
Yeah.
Kangaroos are so lazy. I was at the zoo in Paris, the Parc
the Jardin des Plantes.
Yeah. They have a zoo,
and
they have an outdoor thing for kangaroos, and they have whole families of kangaroos there. And they just lie there, man.
Oh, yeah?
I'm sure in nature they're not like that.
I don't think in nature they're like that.
Yeah.
They do a lot of
It was hot that day,
hopping
though.
around,
But it was very hot that day.
Yeah, well,
I don't think
I would
hopping
be
was...
lazy too. Then.
Yeah. And they were trying to scratch the dirt and find the cool.
Poor babies.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so there's our day in the Tarn.
Thank you so much, Elise. The
You
day in
are
the
quite
Tarn
welcome, Annie.
sounds wonderful.
Sounds wonderful. Let's go.
All right. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you, Beverly Smith and Zara Juliera, for pledging to support the show on Patreon this week. And thank you, Susan Boyd, Molly Cummings, and Judy Dennis for your one-time donation via the Tip Your Guide button, and that you can find on any page on joinusinfrance.com. Patrons and donors get a perk for their support. They get invited to a secret Facebook group where we discuss their plans and exchange ideas. This is a much, much smaller group than the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook, which has over 4,000 members by now. And it is for people who not only listen to the podcast, but are repeat visitors to France. Visit patreon.com/join us to see the different reward tiers, and thank you so much for giving back. Patreon is Patreon. Join us, no dashes or spaces. For my personal update this week, I'll be flying to Paris on Friday to test at least 2 of my GPS-aware tours. I'm pushing to test the third one as well. We'll see if I manage. I already wrote those tours and I've shared them in real life with tour members, but doing the tour through an app isn't quite the same, and I want to try it for myself, and I've never used this app before. It's going to be one of those 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. kind of days. It's the genuine Paris way. And you know what? There's nothing like a tight deadline to get me to complete a lot of work quickly instead of gawking at my vegetable garden. Hey, I love my vegetable garden. It's pretty. And everything is growing nicely. And I have a couple of tomatoes that are turning very red. It's wonderful. But after all that, I'll be looking forward to my vacation in August. I'll be taking a fractured kind of vacation this year. I'll be away the first week of August to the beach. And so there won't be an episode on August 4th. And then I'll be visiting new places in France with family visiting from the US starting in late August. So I'll probably have to skip some episodes around that time as well, but I'll let you know as we get closer to that time. If you want to recommend the podcast to someone who already listens to podcasts, tell them that they'll find the Join Us in France travel podcast anywhere they find their podcast. They just have to search for Join Us in France. If they listen to music but not podcasts on their iPhones, iPhones or any other phone, tell them to search for Join Us in France on Spotify or Pandora. And if they don't normally listen to anything on their phones, send them to joinusinfrance.com. And thank you for listening and spreading the word. And thank you to all of you who have offered to do episodes with me recently. It's going to be a wonderful new crop of podcast episodes. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Have a great week of trip planning or a great time in France this week, and I'll talk to you next week. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2019 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.